Welcome to this week's conversation in our series of conversations with women of significance in STEM leadership. My name is Leah Zalams. I'm your host today. I have a background in biochemistry, in technical equipment and solution sales. And today I teach and coach women leaders in science and technology. And the reason that we're looking at women who are creating success for themselves in the science and tech or STEM industries is because these are traditionally very male dominated. There are a lot of biases, a lot of barriers, a lot of systemic issues that are stopping women from progressing. We don't have anywhere near enough women in the C-suite, at board level, in governments, to be taking that seat at the table, to be making the important decisions for our future. And the second issue we have is that there's not enough girls choosing the science and technology degrees in the first place. So this series of conversations is about exploring some of the success strategies and challenges and ways of overcoming those challenges that these women are doing in spite of the biases and barriers and things that are standing in the way. And today we have with us, all the way from UK, we have Karen Powell of A Matter of Choice. Welcome, Karen.
Hello, Leah. Lovely to speak to you all from a very, very sunny United Kingdom.
Now, Karen, you have a really interesting career background. You didn't start your life in a traditional science and technology domain. You started more in sociology and history, and have a career in HR. But I'd love to hear from you in the first instance. Perhaps give us a little bit of a helicopter view of your career story and the work that you do now that does bring you into the world of STEM.
Thank you. It's really interesting. So way back in the day when I was at school, I wanted to do A-levels in chemistry and biology. But at that time in the education system, if you didn't do 3 sciences, you had to choose 3 arts. So my original career path was I wanted to be a physiotherapist. But because I didn't want to do maths or physics as my third A-level, I ended up doing history, economics and sociology, which were not my love. So my own, although I didn't go into a science degree and a science career, my education system stopped me from doing what I wanted. So it's always been, from when I was a young child, many, many years ago, something that's been a love. So yeah, my background isn't traditionally STEM. I've worked in big UK companies, Asda, part of Walmart, ran their stores. So I was in the store operations. So had a very untraditional career path by going through into the operational side, and then started to be subjected to the systemic biases where they needed people to go into HR. And the people who went into HR, guess what the gender was? Luckily for me, I think that was a real big career change because I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and found my passion, found my purpose about inspiring and helping people. And then I went into learning and development, HR director roles, and then went to the Royal Mail, which was another big company in Asda. So they're both about 180,000 colleagues, so big companies. And at the Royal Mail, then started to work with engineering and fleet. So started to really see some of the issues we had with the female pipeline. At that time, I was a working mum. I'd got 2 young girls. I'd been at board level. I'd had a really great boss who'd been really, in Asda, who'd been really supportive of me. Went to the Royal Mail. It was like going back to the 1920s. It was where my passion was ignited about the injustice of women being supported in not just STEM roles, but in any role. So that was my career background, and spent a lot of time looking at culture and mindsets, started to do a lot on world-class manufacturing. So got involved in a big Kaizen project where we started to look at how we put efficiencies in. So started to see where some of our gaps were with women in the pipeline. We couldn't get apprentices, we couldn't get graduates, we couldn't get general managers, and we were missing that specific character trait that women bring, that diversity of thought. We all know what engineers are like. They're amazing, but you have to challenge and provoke and put empathy within that culture. So my interest started to be about what was happening that stopped women from coming in, as you say, to the career, but also staying. So that was my sort of corporate background. I was then made redundant from the Royal Mail when they were privatising it. And really, another really big nudge for me was I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was like a great big nudge, a big wake-up call for me. And what I started to get really interested in was my children were 10 and 14. My daughter was a mathematician. She wanted to go into that area. She wanted to do physics. And I started to have more time to listen to my children. And I started to have more time to really understand and put myself in their shoes about what on earth was going on. And I also wanted them to come through my cancer experience positively, because their nana had died the year before, and it was about how do you cope, where I guess my interest in mental toughness started, but I didn't know that's what it was called. And then I also have 2 amazing nieces, and my sister's got 2 stepdaughters. So I was immersed in young teenage girls. And that's where my passion for helping young girls came. And we call them lost in the crowd girls. So when you're 13, 14, you start to make choices that protect you. You start to face that system. You start to meet teachers that can't teach girls science. They can't empathise with the girls. And choices start to be made at that point. And I don't think any career talk or anybody coming to talk to those girls helps. My daughter got talked to for was astrophysics person. He completely switched her off, didn't speak her language. So that's where I started to, my sister and I worked together, as you know, in our company, A Matter of Choice, started to look at where are some of the real crunch points in our talent pipeline, and how can we really work to get young girls into the system, but more importantly, protect the young female leaders so they become the role models of the future. So
You're right. We've got to get them in, and you've got to then keep them in long enough so they can become the leaders, become the women they need to be, to take that seat and have a voice and be able to make a difference. We're not getting enough in, and then we're losing them usually around about when they have children.
We did a big female conference about leading with courage and confidence, and I was trying to encourage people from the veterinary profession, and a very senior person who's a chief exec said to me, we haven't got a problem because 75% of our entrants are women. And I just sent him a research paper back and went, yeah, but 10% of your senior leaders are women. Where's the conversion rate? And I did a master's in science, which is where I started to get really interested in the scientific evidence-based approach, and was really interested in trying to deal with chief execs and managing directors. You can't talk wafty stuff to them. You have to talk commercial. You have to talk consequence. You have to talk evidence. So my research was on female leaders in male-dominated industries. And the biggest thing that came out, and what I called it, was the 10 years of hard slog that women have between the ages of approximately 24 to 34, where they're trying to establish themselves. They probably meet someone and want a career, a family, if that's what they want. But it's where the system starts to really drive them into some poor choices. So it is something we can't tolerate anymore, is what I believe.
And there are so many things that are so ingrained in, we've got the human biases, we've got the fact that the business world was created by men for men. Those systemic elements and deeply ingrained humanness, it doesn't change overnight. And this is why it's so important that the work that you do and the work that I do, to be empowering the individuals to learn how to actually be authentic and have the courage and the mental toughness, as you say, as well as that set of skills and attitudes that enables us to create success in spite of those challenges. And with all you've gone through, Karen, what's been the core of your ability? You're clearly a self-starter. You're clearly a high energy visual person as well, in the sense that you can see the consequences and the impacts of what's not working. And you're a communicator. But what's at the core of that? Like, what's the driver behind that?
It's a really great question. And one of the things that we work with in the company, which is, I think it's when you raise to your consciousness what your purpose and your passion is. When you find your course, I think I had it in me all the time when I was a working mum and a senior mum, but it wasn't tangible. You sort of almost put up with the biases and prejudices because you had such a will to succeed. Whereas actually what I've realised is it's a different perspective. And my absolute driver and my sister's driver and everybody we work with is about making a difference. It's about taking responsibility and owning what is happening and not moaning about it. And also, my mantra is a better me, a better world. So actually, it's actually don't try and tackle eating the elephant. It'll kill you. But actually, that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't start somewhere. So we have a rule which is 1% every day. And eventually you'll get to 100%. And I think it's always getting up every day and saying, what am I doing today that's going to make a difference? It might be big, it might be little, it might be just making yourself feel better. But I think it's about taking responsibility for some of the real uncomfortable truths that exist in our system. It's about not being part of the problem, it's about being part of the solution. So my drive is about, I guess, my girls and my sisters' girls are my driver, which is we've got to create a better future for them. We have to, that is my responsibility. We do a lot of work on eldership, and that's it's not a religious connotation. It's not that I'm old. It's about my responsibility is to try and create an environment for our girls that can make a difference for all girls. So that's my driver.
Yeah, there's nothing like having your own children as that mirror and purpose. That is something that I see in my work too, is that women become, like you say, that treadmill of that 24 to 34, and maybe it stretches out a bit to late 30s as well, when they're really on that career treadmill, often putting off having children until. So you've got that. They will be so busy working to please the managers above and their teams. There's none of my needs and what I need left. And so this is where we have the phenomenon of burnout, and we have these machines at work.
We also have this like a male story. I do a lot on narrative coaching. And I think the story that male systems perpetuate is, women need to be more confident. They need to be more assertive. They need to ask. They need to do this. That's a male story, not a female story. So I'm coaching in a big company. And originally it was about confidence. And that's how it was commissioned, the coaching. It's not really about confidence. It's about a man's perception of what a woman needs to do. And so interestingly, with COVID and the pandemic, women are finding a voice in the UK in these companies because the male egotistical system has lost its power and it's diminished its power, because that's about clubs, it's about elite boys clubs. So there's been a real opening for women to have their voice, which we're really trying to drive forward now that the old way of working is coming back. And it's like, it's intolerable, some of the stories that are told about what women need to do. I remember when I resigned from George Clothing, I was part of Asda, and the guy, Andy, was my boss, and he said to me, why are you resigning, Karen? He went, I thought you'd never leave. He said, because you're a working mum and this is close to your children's schools. And I thought, well, I can't tell you what I thought on this interview, but what I learned then is the power of what the conversations that are happening that you're not in. So I think that one of the things, I totally agree with you, is my view and my sister's view, and what our approach is, it's got to be integrated. It can't just be women, because we work in an integrated system. So you have to tackle the system, but more importantly, you have to start with yourself. And my sister's daughter, she's just got a first in physics masters. She's amazing, but it's taken her years and years because the physics system doesn't really appreciate women in the way they learn. So we have to also think about the educational system and look at where are the biases there and where are they stifling people. So I think it's a big job, but you have to take a step every day and join as a community of women, but also men who help.
But I'm also hearing a very different perspective, Karen, because every article, every report, it all pairs back to, oh, girls don't have enough confidence. They lose it, as we say, in those early years in childhood, and then that translates into women don't have enough confidence. They don't take enough risks. And this is interesting what you said earlier about that's the male narrative, that's the male perspective. So how do you facilitate empowerment for women in that environment? If it's not confidence, then what is it?
Well, I'm a coach like you. I believe in coaching. It's evidence-based. I did my master's in it to prove it was an evidence-based intervention. And when I did my master's dissertation on mental toughness, what I really liked about mental toughness was the combination of influencers on how you are the best version of yourself. So my master's research was the first in its kind in this topic, which is amazing. So what I've been doing since then is applying it to my coaching, which is I work with the narrative. So if I was coaching you or whoever's listening, I would find out what is the story you're telling yourself. What is it that you're saying in here about who you are and what you're good at, what you're bad at, what other people are saying. And once you find the narrative, you can then start to reframe it. I'm a believer confidence is an output of something. Yes. You can't necessarily teach it. Women are only unconfident in certain situations. So if you can isolate which is the situation which triggers them, and actually say you're confident for 90% of your life, what is it about this situation? You can actually be much more targeted, focused. Because generally, and you'll know this, women are confident in almost all of their situations. It's a trigger point. But what I think is really interesting is, so what we do is we have a program called No Labels, No Limits. And it's the work we do, it's all about self-awareness, because that is the biggest key. We do a lot of work on what are your labels at the minute and what are your limits, and then work to reframe them. So start from the inside out, and then using a lot of strengths-based work, because if you talk to a woman and you say, what are you good at? And you get a liturgy of things they're bad at. It's so interesting. And I did a lot of work on self-awareness in my dissertation, and there's a great book by a lady who said that 95% of us think we're self-aware. When you actually do the work on feedback and getting all the formal stuff, it's only 10 to 15% of us. And for women, the issue is we're unaware of our strengths. For men, it's about they're aware but don't care, or they're not aware. So you're working with two different systems, but we're trying to put one size in. So a very long way of saying it is I work with the narrative.
We know that transformation happens in the specifics, and it's so individual. And that's why these one size fits all, whether it's a development program, the cookie cutter approach does not work. And people are scrambling for what does work. And it sounds like an evidence-based best practice, looking at the mental toughness framework. As we know, there's over 100 published academic papers from various disciplines: sport, education, business. And then applying that, and then how can we use these evidence-based tools to improve our specific awareness, both about ourselves and how others see us.
And I think that's a real challenge for STEM, because my experience and understanding of what I've worked with, so I do a lot of work with engineers, we do a lot of work in the pharmaceutical, we do a lot of work now with the male-dominated industries, is that there's a story and a narrative about STEM that isn't necessarily enabling you to make the change. The whole focus in the UK is, so if they want to get people into STEM roles, guess what? There's a female apprentice on a poster. If they want to get a graduate into an engineering role, guess what? They bring a female graduate to a career path. It's like a totem. So it's the approach we've got. So if you've got children, and my daughters and my nieces have got a really, really strong story in their head already, which is, this isn't for me, this isn't for me. You could bring a whole trail of female role models to them, but they're not listening to the story. So I think we've got to find a different way. It's a very old-fashioned way, I think, that they're trying to encourage children to come into STEM. My utter frustration that Leslie and I have all the time, there's no investment in female development. In fact, in male-dominated industries, it's said, why do we need to? It's positive discrimination. And you think, well, that is a load of baloney. So for me, what we try and do is reframe the STEM story, and which is how you go and talk to these young girls, people who they get, who listen to them, really listen to what their barriers are, instead of telling them why they should be in it. And then in work, so we're just starting a program, it's early years managerial roles, which is about basis of mental toughness, but is about identity. It's about purpose, and it's about self-awareness, because they're the three findings from my research. So we're going to
say those again, Karen. So it's identity, awareness,
purpose and self-awareness. And our coaching model is called TIPS, which is thriving is the equivalent of having a strong identity, a sense of purpose, and really good self-awareness. And we're doing it as open programs, and we're taking the price down, because again, it is not accessible monetary wise for a lot of women if their companies won't pay for it. And that has to change. Really interestingly, as a complete aside, we couldn't find any good role models in the UK to talk to. So we went over to the Maasai last year. There's a guy who came to the mental toughness conference, Anthony
Yes.
Willoughby. And what Leslie and I heard was that there's a guy over there who has totally changed some of the female roles in his tribes. Not because his why isn't because it's morally right. His why is a commercial why, which is if I don't do this, we're going to fail as a tribe, we're going to not get our funding. And he has reduced female mutilation, he's polygamous, all of the marriages, he's got stuff for the kids. And we went over because we couldn't find a UK model. And what he's done is the leader, which is what we have to do with STEM, is absolutely 100% committed to the change. And it doesn't matter if his why is not a moral why. If his why is a commercial why, so what? Use it. We should stop being so moralistic about this and use any lever we can. So very, very strong leader, absolutely ruthless about the system, ruthless about the behaviours, call out the uncomfortable truths, and every single thing he does, the narrative is about what he wants. Unbelievable role model. And I think that's what we have to have. We have to start from within with the women, start with some chief execs and make them accountable. How many have like a pay report where still we've got so many companies not dealing with it, and they still haven't got any consequence? It's like,
and yet we've got countries like Iceland that simply draw the line and make it illegal to not have equal pay. Now, surely that's the fastest route to a systemic change that has consequences. There is report after report after report now showing us when you have greater diversity in your senior decision-making teams, then the commercial gains are there. But it's just not moving the dial fast enough. And you're absolutely right. You need to connect consequences with behavior and hold their feet to the fire. And I think this is a role that we as committed change makers and coaches and trainers, with the skills, with the education and with the passion to create a better world and a better environment for our children to come into, boys and girls, that we need to get tougher, perhaps with how we coach. So that could be a whole other conversation, Karen.
We have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility, and we have to hold people to account, whatever the consequence. We have to.
And you are already doing so much about what you see and then changing the way you're working and democratizing the leader development, the empowerment work to make it available and affordable to a broader cross-section of the workforce, because we need to be empowering and teaching and coaching much earlier, not just waiting for C-level, because that's where typically it has been an investment made once the executives are well into their careers. So imagine what kind of capacity and mindset and attitudes we can help craft if we can access the high performers and the ambitious ones that want to do more than just turn up for a job.
It's also point in case. She's a data analyst. She likes numbers. She's quite shy, quite introvert. Every one-to-one she has with her boss, he says to her, you need to be more assertive. You need to be more ambitious. You need to do this. There's all this bit about you're a woman. You need to be confident. You need to be assertive. You need to be ambitious. What we need to do with these girls is nurture them, and their ambition will come. Instead of forcing, they reflect as a lot of women in STEM. They're introverts in a good way. They need to think. So we need to put a system in place that reflects their characters, and actually their ambition will come, but in a different way to other areas. We don't treat women in STEM in the characters that they are. We treat them in this one way, and ambition and aspiration comes in a different way. So I totally agree with you, but we do also need to understand that when she's asked what's your ambition, it makes her cringe.
Because that's not the language, that's not the narrative that she resonates with.
And also the other thing that is really interesting is we have to have specialist career paths for these people. It shouldn't be that if you're interested in all of this STEM work that you'll have to become a general manager. And I did a lot of work with designers, and it was the worst thing we could do with them. It wasn't their passion, it wasn't their purpose. So we actually, I think as well, another thing that we're trying to look at is what are the pathways for women in STEM? By making a manager and a line manager, you're taking them away from their love. The traditional career paths are not suited for a lot of women in STEM. So that's another area I think we have to stand up and shout about. We'll have a bad throat every time we're shouting about what we're
So we're coming to the close of this conversation today, but you have had a life full of learnings and wisdom that you're now sharing and teaching and coaching others. So what would be one thing that you know now that you wish you knew perhaps 20 years ago?
I think the one thing that I wish I'd known was that the biases and the prejudices in our system and in the workplace are not right. They're not something you should deal with and cope with. They're something that should be tackled. And that's what I wish I'd known. And that's what I say to everybody, that it's not right, it's not fair, it's not equal, it's not just.
And this has been shown recently with the Black Lives Matter movement, that by not speaking up, you are actually complicit by not challenging, by not sharing a point of view. And this is again how we use our voice, and we've got to know what we want to say in order to use it. And coming back to that awareness, and it's not just about our personalities, it's so much deeper and broader than that. It's about the awareness about ourselves, the system we're in, and what is really not right, and not accepting it just because that's always been that way. What is culture? It's the way things are done around here. We must challenge.
I had a coach, and it was a number of things that I would pass on to everybody, and I do, which are things like, don't put yourself in a pecking order, don't seek approval, apologise afterwards. But the one thing that a coach said to me was, you are colluding with this, Karen. And where our company formed was about choice, because she said, and it's your choice whether you choose to do that or not. She said, I'm not judging you. She said, I know why you're doing it. She said, but it's your choice about what you do next. And it's your choice if you put your head above the parapet and sort this out. And that's why our company's called A Matter of Choice. Was it doesn't matter if you choose to not do it. It doesn't matter if you choose to do it, but take responsibility for your choice. And that is what I just think, are you colluding with it, Karen? Are you colluding with it? And that is what my driver is. So yeah, it's a matter of choice.
It's such a great name, and it's clearly front and center of who you are. If we come back to that ikigai diagram of doing what you're good at, doing what you love, and doing something the world needs, and getting paid for what that world needs you to be doing. This is when we're living and leading and working on purpose. And this is where we really can work in our strengths. And that's interesting, as you were saying, that this is an area of work that if we can facilitate that connection with women of all ages to be identifying and working in those strengths, then that's going to help them to make different choices as well.
To resource them and equip them. A matter of choice. Your choice is about being 100% in control, which we all know is at the heart of how you cope with stresses, challenges, how you thrive, how you get ambition. So if you can actually be in control of your choice and not meander into choices, which is a lot of what happens with women, you actually then get powerful, and powerful in a good way. So
powerful from the inside out. So being driven by your own drivers and
authenticity and truth and being who you are. And this is the time for women now. The pandemic has opened doors. It's changed things that I'm hoping that, this is really awful, but I'm hoping that a lot of traditional cultures, particularly in the UK, they're really struggling here. And I'm hoping it's a nudge to them that things have to change. I'm hoping that this is like how women rise, because the research I've done on leadership development is empathy and emotional intelligence, compassion are all the critical leadership skills, which are female traits. So I think it's our time. Hashtag revolution, not evolution, because we're tired of the people picking around the edges. We've got to have, as you say, a full scale stand up and be counted. So look forward to the journey with everybody. It's an amazing group of women. So you know, it's been great talking to you, and it's very inspiring.
And Karen, for people who want to learn more about your work and your programs and connect with you, where's the best place to connect with you?
Our website, which is www.amatterofchoice.co.uk, or LinkedIn, we're A Matter of Choice, or I'm Karen Powell, you can link into that. And I'm also connected to you, Leah, on LinkedIn. So if all else fails, find you, find me.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. There is just so much passion and wisdom and experience, and I'm totally with you. I think that our time is now to be making sure that that we seize the opportunity to take our rightful place and be steering and driving within our power and making our choices. So I really thank you for your time today, and I look forward to more conversations with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.